Coming up, as we take a closer look at the Brooklyn Nets win over the Memphis Grizzlies, is this a case of message received for one Cam Thomas with a season high in assists, or more on the way? We dive in, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, this episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, as we have several days before the Nets take the court again Friday night against the Boston Celtics, looking back at that Memphis game and really diving in on how much Jordi Fernandez is able to influence and see the impact of the coaching that he wants to put forth, especially for young players like Cam Thomas.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. I think it's going to be a theme of the year. I think with every game that goes by, it's a reminder that Jordi Fernandez was just exactly the right hire. I mean, we felt this way during the summer for sure. And then knowing that he had sort of like high-level experience beyond just sitting, not quite end the bench with the rest of the coaching staff, obviously with the assistant role of the Kings, it felt so good. And then, we come off a game where he's critical of Cam Thomas in terms of just like Cam Thomas like needing to sort of get into the ball distribution game and not just be a scorer. And he has a really pretty inefficient scoring game, but they also win. And he dishes out, I mean, this is his career high. It was definitely the season high, 6 assists. And so whether or not this stuff is sticky, it's going to be, we're going to find out, obviously. The proof will be in the data pudding. But overall, it's a great sort of like, this happened here and then we got the result here kind of scenario with Cam Thomas, where it's like he's critical about it, Jordi Fernandez, and then Cam Thomas goes out the next game, throws a nice lob pass, has passing on his mind a little bit more, and Nets win without having him to score too much. And I think if that can be something that goes through the rest of the season, then we really have something. And I credit Cam Thomas more than Jordi, right? But because Cam Thomas is the one that goes out and does it. But right. I think the marriage here might be a pretty good one.
Going back to last year, February 6th, baby, against the Dallas Mavericks, 8 assists for Cam Thomas. That's his career high mark. But to your point, we agreeing on Jordi Fernandez and that he's the right hire. But we've been saying early on, it's only 8 games in. But when you hear these post games, and even in the offseason, when I said, hey, I think it's great that he called the timeout and went over to Noah Clowney at the time and said, where were you on that closeout? Like, you need to be there. There was some pushback around the idea of going to be a long season. Can you really afford with these young players to make these type of statements, to come out after and say, Dennis Schroeder, we need him to be efficient and to be a facilitator. He's the engine for the offense. Same thing with Noah Clowney. Same thing with Cam Thomas in this instance. And then, yes, of course, it's a good thing. You need a coach that has a plan and that holds his players accountable. And hopefully, to your point, 6 assists for Cam Thomas. I want to get into what is maybe an inefficient start here for the season for him in a lot of ways, but you need him to be able to do this. You have a lot of perimeter shooters around you. The team is playing good basketball, and that makes a big difference here too. When we usually talk about Cam Thomas, or the way some detractors would talk about Cam Thomas, is to say, oh, the guy puts up a ton of points when the team's losing, when it doesn't matter. Well, now the team's 4-4 and they're playing well. So he is going to have these nights when he doesn't shoot so well, and you get the opportunity to set others up. 6 assists. I'd like it to have been a career high or tie the career high in 8, but at least it looks like he got the message. And in that game against Memphis, by the way, there were key moments when you saw it, where clearly, unlike the game prior, when he was willing to just go into the lane, get beat up, get knocked going to the basket, and put up really difficult shots, this time around, he distributed quicker, made the extra pass, and you saw the product.
Yeah, look, and progress isn't linear here. We know that Cam Thomas's sort of developmental path has been one that has been, featured by a number of starts and stops. The coaching has not been good over the last couple of years. There's been no real consistency up until last year, mid-year or something like that, with where his role even was in the team. And even then it was not totally clear how the team views him. Still, it's kind of still not totally clear how the team views him, with not getting a contract extension, a rookie contract extension, or anything like that. So it's this has just been a theme for him overall. I do think knowing that we have a coach that seems to, A, get it, B, be fine voicing whatever it is, whatever it is that he maybe is having issues with, and then C, almost for sure has full organizational backing to say whatever it is that he thinks is correct. I think I think knowing those things is the best chance to get sort of peak Cam Thomas, and really anybody, peak Cam Thomas play out of him. So I think if there was a scenario where it was going to happen, this really, really feels like it. Again, I don't think we're going to get this graph 1-to-1 going up the graph of the assists just keep climbing. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to see, peaks and valleys, and maybe one of those, if you look at the S&P 500 or Bitcoin or something like that, it's if you look at the whole view of it, it goes up. But if you're taking it on a daily basis, you're going to see some pretty wild movement, right, at times. And so I think that that's going to probably be the case. Although I will say we've been waiting sort of years for this, and it hasn't really ever stuck for him either. So I'm cautiously optimistic after one game and a couple quotes from Jordi Fernandez that it's going to be the case. And I'd have to just, before I felt like it, I'd have to just see it. I just have to see it for multiple games, or at least see the effort, right? Because not all assist attempts are going to go down. Players miss shots. There have been opportunities for him this year where he's had nice looks and they haven't gone down. Although you can say that about a lot of players, because that's just that tends to come out in the wash. But yeah, overall, it's a good sign. And look, this is just what we said for years. You want to be the next level of player, you kind of have to do more stuff, right?
Next level things, right? Yeah.
You have to be able to punish defenses where they don't think you're just a one-trick kind of guy, that you're going to do the same thing. Even if you do that one thing exceptionally well, you have to be able to do other things well above average also, because that's what the best players in the game can do. The best players in the game do one or two things at the highest level and then do everything else pretty well, right? Mm-hmm. And if you have a hole that's not totally like that, there is just a ceiling on how high you can go. But I think he has it in him. I just think that it's just still got to take the wait and see approach.
Yeah, overall, it's a positive development. Again, I keep coming back to coach said thing, player bonds with execution on the court. The other interesting part of this is what it looks like when we go inside the stats since the start of the season and how he's performed for the effort and emphasis on this. We're starting to be down in terms of average, in terms of shooting percentages. And I'm curious if the desire to change the game, to be that other part facilitator in that regard, is impacting his ability to be a pure scorer. We'll get into that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Hims. Look, guys, sometimes intimate moments that can happen spontaneously. You want to be ready so you can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Look, your sex life is important. Your schedule's busy. You don't have time to go to the doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Look, Hims is changing men's healthcare, providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Check and check. Hims provides an access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra, Cialis, and the generics are up to 95% cheaper. Those are numbers you can get behind. Look, start your free online visit at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Him.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable, compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Cam Thomas, the performance coming off the Memphis game, 6 assists. Is it going in the right direction? I will say the other side of this conversation is where his shooting performances have been, right? So as Jordi Fernandez says, when the ball isn't going down for you, or when defenses are doing different things, you got to be able to impact the game in another way. Well, you go back and look over the last 5 games for him, actually last 6 games. No, sorry, last 5. Good numbers. I count. 4 out of the last 5, he shot 36% or less from the field. And for a Nets team, when the volume is 20, 23, 17 shots a game, you're seeing a little bit of a drop off there. The percentage from beyond the arc has taken a big dip here as well over the last handful of games. He shot in the teens in 4 out of those last 5 games, 0 of 4 against the Grizzlies, but it comes in a win. So I think that this cuts both ways here. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, you ask for something different from a player, you have to then accentuate the positives, setting up teammates, and not just sit there and go, well, where's the shooting from beyond the arc? You won the basketball game. If you're winning games and you have your player and Cam Thomas contributing to it, then I think you want to have a little bit of wiggle room and expectations around where the shooting goes, because I think you're trying to do a both and. If you're Cam Thomas, all right, I want this to work, I want to focus on this area, it can have an impact on the shooting performance as well.
Yeah, it's one of these things like, if you look at the numbers, because, it's funny, if you look at the numbers for him, they don't do him a ton of favors here. I mean, 25 points a game, great, but it's essentially in line with where he was been points per minute, right? 31.4 last year to 34 minutes and, 22.5 points last year. It's like not a crazy difference in his points per minute. The efficiency has dropped. He's down on the field goal percentage from 44 to 42. The 3-pointer has kind of dropped precipitously here. I mean, he's taking more 3-pointers a game, almost 8 per game, but he's down to 30.6 percentage, and that's way off his 34% career, and really off his 36% from last year, right? So like, these are not amazing efficiency numbers, and if you're going to combine being not efficient with not ball distribution, the math starts to not work for you, right? At some point, right? Like that math, that's really not a math problem you can win. And the anti-Cam Thomas that's not anti. The reality of the Cam Thomas situation is, and this is what makes him such a polarizing player, right? Which is why people can never agree. And I'm not sure this season, we said before the season, I'm not sure the season is going to do anything to clarify anything. I think most people, I suspect that most people's opinions of Cam Thomas, how they came in this season, they will leave this season with, because it's going to be like, well, Nets are a bad team and he took all the shots, and if you put him on another team that wouldn't happen. Like, all the story, I know what all the anti CT rhetoric is here. Also, if you just look at the on and off court numbers over the last couple of years, the Nets are just better with him off the court. Yeah, he plays against the starters, and I get it, he has harder matchups. I understand sort of the context around it, but we're looking at a really pretty large sample size at this point of the team just scores more and plays better defense when he's not on the floor. Like this year, 272 minutes, minus 5.39 net rating, 115 offensive, 120 defensive. Off the court, 117 minutes. Yeah, again, small sample size, plus 11.5. So 16-point swing here. I'm rounding down. 116 offensive rating, so higher, and 104 defensive rating, so it's lower. Again, small sample. I get it. But if you shake it out over a couple of years, that's kind of in lockstep with what it was last year too, right? So you change the coach, you change some of the people around them, and it's it's not exactly the same because they weren't as good off with him off the court last year, but they've been a -5 net rating over 2,300 minutes with him on the court, and a positive net rating over 2,000 minutes with him off the court. I mean, that's rough to look at if you're making the case for him. And I don't know. I mean, what do you hear when you hear those numbers? Because it's I'm all for him. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but it's easy to make the case against it. If I'm going that direction, it's not hard to make the case against it.
Was that going through? You're talking about minutes on off. Is that going through just last season?
I'll separate it real quick. So
yeah, because and while you do it, because we're speaking to, obviously we know, as we talk about with a lot of guys, if you take it all the way back to when he was here, and then when superstars were also here, that can impact the numbers. Now, by the way, it wouldn't, and that wouldn't change it anyway. But go ahead, yeah.
Okay, high level, 2,000 minutes both ways, on and off, -5 on, +1 off. That's over 2 seasons.
Okay,
right? Okay, so that's just over 2 seasons. This year, it's -5 off. +11, sorry, -5 on, +11 off, right? So 16-point swing with him off the court, small sample. So let's just factor it in that way. And that's again, new coach, new system, everything else. And then if you just go to last year, it's -6 off, -5.7 off or on. And then they're right around neutral with him off. So it's look, Cliff Notes TLDR here. They've just been a better team with him not on the court. And I'm pretty much the same on offense and considerably better on defense. That's just the numbers.
And I wonder if you'll agree with I wonder what you'll think about this, because we've talked about 2 players the most for the Brooklyn Nets this season, and we talk about these 2 players a lot last season. Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas. And for very different reasons, because they're two completely different players with different roles and different skill sets and different ages and different injury histories and all that stuff. But we always come back to, well, what is the value of this player to this team? And it was happening again this year with Ben Simmons. When he's off the court, team's better than when he's on the court. And that's the part that I think with Cam Thomas, this year will feel more clarifying and more crystallizing than it has in the past. And the start of this season feels like, hey, we are going to be able to look at the data like you're talking about, the on-off numbers, and actually trust it this year as opposed to years past. Why? Because teams win in basketball games. Because the team underneath Jordi Fernandez seems like they have a system in place. Because other guys like Dennis Schroeder look like they have a clear and present value to make sure that this team functions and runs the right way. So it just would be ironic if a player that we want to do well, we want Ben Simmons to do well also, but a player that we've, I think, tried to be in the corner of over the course of it, and we've been swayed by his performances over the years for Cam Thomas and have said we can't figure out why the organization doesn't want to push the full go with him. Well, now finally you're in a year where it is the full go from the start. And while the scoring numbers look excellent, the next maybe 10 to 15 games will be telling about whether or not he can rein this in to be a version of efficient scoring, and yes, to some extent, facilitator for this team on a night in, night out basis, because otherwise it's that high level perspective. He's a great scorer, but is he much else for your team? And if it starts to be that you're negatively impacting over positively, then I think some of those voices that were detractors from Cam Thomas get a little bit louder and maybe justifiably.
It's, again, let's play it out for a whole season and see where we are.
Oh, yeah.
It's still a developmental season, and there's no reason to, I don't think, make any grand judgments. And by the way, no. I get this. Having been walked in these Nets streets for years now, you bring up Cam Thomas, forget it. There's people that absolutely love him and that you don't want to hear otherwise. There's people that think he's just stone cold bad and they don't want to hear otherwise. It's like talking politics. You can't even talk about it really. You say one thing and it's just
and there's guys that look at him and say he's Dame Lillard, right? Sorry, not to cut you off. And then the other group is like, he's Dame Lillard. Wait until he just starts lighting up the scoreboards night over night. And that's the chasm with which you're shouting across when you try to find middle ground.
I could say 50 nice things about him and then bring up one negative thing and they'll call you a hater. You don't know ball or some, idiotic statements that people use or whatever. But so I get it. I believe me, having been through having been around this carousel a few times, I understand it. I'm just saying, these are the numbers. This is just what it is. And we can put all the context in the world around it. And I think we have to agree. Everyone would agree that his game gets better if he can score and pass, right? I mean, that's not a hot take, right? It's like, oh, is it good if you can score and pass? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think we all could agree on that. So we'll get a little bit more to it here. A couple closing thoughts, and then what we're going to look at from the week ahead. We'll get into that here in just 1 second. First, tell you about our friends over at Built. Look, listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Look, we've all been there, feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, but here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program. Hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay. 500 plus airlines, 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can use those points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA to start earning points with your rent payments today. Anybody done with that? Head on over to our friends at Game Time. Nothing better than going to a concert, a theater show, comedy, or like we're talking about here, sports event. I got to tell you something. This weekend, I walk into the kitchen. My wife is buying tickets, and she's trying to get tickets for a concert, artist I won't name. I look at the screen. She's like, I'm having trouble with this. I can't go. It's not going through. I said, what are you doing? I said, get off. She's on some other site, by the way. Disaster, embarrassing. Instantly, I go over to Game Time. She struggled this thing for a half hour. Doesn't call for help. Doesn't have me come in with the cape on. Over to Game Time. I'm telling you, 90 seconds later, we had the tickets. 90 seconds. Like, that was literally it. You want a testimonial? That's how easy it was with Game Time. After struggling with the other sites, went over to Game Time, had the tickets. Daughter's happy. She's going to the concert she wants to go to. We see exactly what we're going to see when we sit down. Well, I'm not going to it. She is, but exactly what she's going to see when she sits down. We knew we got the lowest price guarantee. We got the event cancellation protection as well. It's all there. You got to download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off with your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
All right, so as we tie a bow on the Locked On Nets episode, we said there at the top, long wait. You know, the Locked On podcast, we don't take 4 days off in between games, but Brooklyn Nets do. They'll play Friday night against
Disgusting. Like, the 4 days off. Could you imagine? I wish we could take 4 days off. Yeah. Oh God. You know,
in a world where we get 4 days off. But Boston Celtics Friday night, obviously. And then we talked about this on yesterday's episode, this 12-day stretch where they're going to play Boston twice. They're going to play the New York Knicks twice. The Pelicans are going to be in there. And we're going to maybe learn a lot about where this team is in terms of competitive ability over the course of the season. Cam Thomas, round out on him because there's other veterans now coming out of this Memphis game that are worth noting. I want to see him develop. I hope that he does. And to your point, saying that, hey, maybe the next 10 to 15 games doesn't look so good, or it still has the low percentages, it is what it is. This is a good year to take a high-level 82-game perspective on it and make holistic decisions around what you want this roster to be going forward. And thankfully, you feel like the head coach can inform that as well. The other guys, is someone like Cam Johnson. I also want to get to Dorian Finney-Smith because he finally started knocking down some shots. Cam Johnson, we did this a year ago, Doug. You were the leader of this in the first like 10 to 15 games of the season because we were advocates to have traded Dorian Finney-Smith 2 off seasons ago. So when the season started and Dorian Finney-Smith was lighting the world on fire, Doug Norrie violently screamed across these podcast airwaves, trade him now. For the love of God, trade him now. The Nets didn't do that. I feels like Cam Johnson is like right on the edge of being in that pocket of being like, do it now, 20+ point performances. Do it now, showing his value on the court, passing, court vision, helping players. Like the next 2 weeks might be the time to strike when the iron is hot. And ironically, by Friday night and playing Boston a couple times and maybe the Knicks, all this Cam Johnson's value could come crashing down to earth. We know they're not going to make these trades right in this moment, but it does feel like the sell high time is almost imminent with Cam Johnson.
Well, the sell time has just been forever, right? We've been wanting them to sell. Like it kind of.
It's always been.
It kind of wouldn't. Yeah. It kind of wouldn't matter. Honestly, like thank goodness he's starting off shooting, okay, and has had some bigger scoring games. I mean, it's not totally there for him for the shooting, but they just no. This is going to be all season. Like they just have to trade these guys. They just have to trade them. I do think that like rival teams probably aren't like susceptible to like short-term shooting variance, right? Like they're going to just sort of have an idea of what they think a player is. And it's not going to matter if some guy goes 4 for 6 one game and then like 1 for 7 next game. I don't think, other teams are toggling up their trade value calculator on a game-to-game basis on these guys. For me, the key is 1, look functional, hit some shots. Don't be terrible, right? Don't be terrible. And then we can do it. And then 2, but the more important, don't get hurt. It's like the problem here is, it's like it's the risk of injury, I think, is way higher than like shooting variance. Yes. And these guys just have injuries in their bag. And they're not exactly young. And you just have to get out from under these contracts while they're healthy. This actually is to me the bigger risk. If you try to run these guys 40 games in decent minutes, which is what they're playing in, like especially DFS, who plays like small ball 5 at times, you just have to get out of these contracts because we cannot have like these Seth Curry, Joe Harris situations where you get into the trade deadline, the guys are hurt, and good luck. No one's going to take these guys at the trade deadline if they're hurt. And so to me, it's more about that. It's play okay, play fine. If you play well, even better. Just don't be awful, and please don't get hurt. For all the reasons we don't want injuries anyway. But this one, it just has this double effect of it'll just crater their trade value. And they just have to get out from under it before that happens.
The Cam Johnson, I agree with you, by the way. That's really the biggest thing, especially with Cam Johnson, who has that injury history in his bag. 3 games in November, he's shooting 20 points per night, had back-to-back 20-plus point performances, also shooting almost 54% from the field. The ironic thing is, as you were mentioning about his shooting, the perimeter looks have not been so great, right? He's been, 8 of 23 from beyond the arc in these last 3 games. So that's actually the part of his game, and wasn't any better to start the season, 37%. So he's been struggling from deep, but I actually take solace in the fact that he's found a way to impact the game. It's not unlike we say at the top about Cam Thomas. Hey, perimeter shot isn't going down for you, Johnson. Well, how are you going to make sure you impact the game? He's been a double-digit scorer in every single game this season. And even though one on a time we asked the question, could he be a 20-point scorer for the Brooklyn Nets? Maybe that dream is dead, but he's splitting the difference now going into November after averaging almost 15 to start the year. The other guy you mentioned there is Dorian Finney-Smith, who did finally turn it around here. The perimeter shooting for him has also been absolutely brutal, which, by the way, as an aside, the team is 4-4 with Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith not shooting well from the perimeter. Like, you would not, coming into this season, have thought the Nets would have been 500 through 8 games, let alone if you gave the Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson 3-point shooting numbers, think they had any chance to be involved in these games. And yet, Dorian Finney-Smith turns it around here nicely, gives a 17-point performance in the win over the Grizzlies, 6 of 10, 5 of 8 from deep, was 2 of 3 going back to the game against Detroit in the loss as well. He's another player. The difference here for me, when we're talking about veteran value, is Cam Johnson, it feels like, hey, this thing can kind of surge here a little bit. Stays healthy, looks productive, all the things we're talking about. For Dorian Finney-Smith, it really just does feel like waiting for when, because his role is his role. You mentioned they shoved him into small ball 5 a bit here. They've done that over the time in Brooklyn as well. But it just does feel like he's out of place a little bit in the new direction of this team with long, athletic players that have more positional versatility.
Yeah, look, it's great to have a great veteran on the team. He's a great veteran. Everyone loves him, right? Like, he's a consummate pro. Like, multiple. This is why teams want him. This is why Dallas kind of wanted him back maybe at times. It's like they just people love playing with him. I'm all for it. He's great to have on the team. If you're a tanking team, he is a kind of a good guy to have on the team, like from a professionalism. Wasn't like some heralded prospect, but has like made a great NBA career out of it, right? And so like these are the kind of guys you want around. And at some point, like, he's just not part of your long-term, not part of the long-term vision. So and I honestly think I'm kind of saying this as an emotional hedge because I actually think he's just going to be on the team. I actually don't think they're going to, I think they're going to have trouble trading him. And I've said this, we said this for years, between the player option next year and just the contract now. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. Right. And so maybe it's a situation, I don't even know. It's just hard. We struggled with this from the very beginning. And no one's talked more about the difficulty in trading DFS than this podcast over the last, definitely 6 months. And so I just think everyone should be prepared for this guy to be on the team and for him to pick up the option too. I think that's a realistic thing. Cause again, it's like, if it was the end of the year, maybe he'd be buyout territory guy because he could probably land as a buyout guy with like another team. But having that $15 million player option next year means you're not buying that out. And so, and he shouldn't, he obviously. So I think everyone should be prepared for DFS. I think Cam gets traded, but I'm going to bet now that DFS stays on the team. Be prepared to be wrong about that one. Okay, we're going to get out of here. Thanks everyone for rocking with us all season long. Nets, well, never mind. Nets are trying too. Everyone's trying. Good news. Nets are trying. We're trying. We didn't think that was going to be the case, but everyone's holding up their end of the bargain. Make sure you hold up your end of the bargain. Subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast.
Do not wait to strike until the iron is hot, but make it hot by striking. Why that is Bill Butler Yeeties.
One of the all-time, probably dead, right? Okay.
Yeah,
well,
it's
yeah. Okay. One of the all-time great poets, RIP. He'll be missed. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.